So welcome everyone to our part 2 of our navigating the LOI database. Today we're going to be talking about fishing vessel records. Next slide, please. Okay. All right, so we join you today with respect and gratitude for Indigenous peoples who are the traditional stewards of the lands and waters where we work and live. We acknowledge our national office is in Treaty 1 territory and that the land is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We recognize that we are all attending from different places, and we welcome you to acknowledge the territory you are currently occupying. Our community extends across Canada on the ancestral territories of many Indigenous nations, and we give thanks to the many generations of Indigenous people who continue to care for these lands. As recipients of redress, we encourage Japanese Canadians and all who join us to take actions in support of a more equitable society, including learning more about Indigenous histories near you. Next slide, please. So today, we are doing the second part to our navigating databases, and we are going to have Mike Abe, who's the project manager of the PWFC project. Lisa Uyeda is the archivist for the PWFC project and the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center, as well as Tomoko Shida, who is the archivist for the PWFC project, and myself, Emily Coppolella. I'm the organization and methods researcher for the NAJC. Next slide, please. So our special guests today are Dr. Jordan Stanger-Ross, who is the co-director of the PWFC project and UVic professor. We have Louise Noguchi, who is a visual artist, a Birch contemporary, and Marlene Howell, who is another visual artist for the Federation of Canadian Artists. Next slide, please. So for today, our session goals are going to be how the Japanese Canadian fishing boat records came to be a part of the LOI database, how these records have been used as a source of inspiration by Japanese Canadian artists in particular, and how to navigate the LOI database to find the fishing boat records and other resources. Next slide, please. All right. So yours and your family's lived experiences and the records that document our history may include unjust racist actions, statements, and terminology which may be upsetting. So thinking about how the forced uprooting, internment, and incarceration, dispossession, and exile has affected you can lead to positive or negative thoughts or memories. We understand that revisiting these painful memories can be an important step in the healing process, but however, it can also lead to difficult thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You may experience emotional reactions hours, days, or weeks later, and this is not uncommon. When past emotions or memories are triggered, you need to be kind to yourself and others, and it's helpful to have a plan of how to take care of yourself as a way to honor what you've been through. Next slide, please. So here we have some self-care strategies. You can always be kind to yourself, laugh, cry, and talk, spend time with your families. You can do things such as journaling, asking for help, take walks, exercise, make sure you get lots of healthy food and sleep, and pray or seek spiritual or religious support if you need. Next slide, please. So Bounce Back is a free skill building program managed by the Canadian Mental Health Association. It is designed to help adults and youth 15 and up manage low mood, depression, anxiety, stress, or worry. It's delivered over the phone with a coach and through online videos. You will get access to tools that will support you on your path to mental wellness. And the crisis helpline is a suicide crisis helpline, and they are available to help anyone thinking about suicide or if you're worried about someone else. They are available to listen with compassion and without judgment and help you explore ways to create safety when things are overwhelming. So you can call or text the number on the screen at any time, and all lines are open 24/7, 365. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Jordan Stanger-Ross. Dr. Jordan Stanger-Ross is a professor of history at University of Victoria, and his research focuses on migration, race, and inequality in the 20th century North America, especially internment and dispossession of Japanese Canadians. So he's led the Landscapes of Injustice project and now co-directs Past Wrongs, Future Choices and which is an international collaboration exploring histories of wartime incarceration and their legacies. So, Jordan?
Thank you. Please advance the slide. Okay. Today's session is about difficult and important records, and we can see an example of the record that we'll be looking at here. Most of the session today is going to be focused on Japanese Canadians who have been doing fantastic work, both making the records available and also doing creative interpretive work with those records. I've been asked and am very pleased to be here today to talk a little bit about how the record group came to be part of the Landscapes of Injustice research. And I'm delighted to do so in connection with the Archives cluster of PWFC, and I know Lisa Uyeda will be talking later representing that cluster, and also with the National Association of Japanese Canadians, which was a partner on Landscapes of Injustice and again on PWFC. And I'm thankful to Emily and the NAJC for hosting this event with us. I'm fortunate to be able to work with these records in the company of such fantastic colleagues. Whenever we work with a record like this, it's because someone decided to save it or preserve it or pass it down over time. And in this case, the records that were preserved or passed down over time include this ledger that we can see here on this image. And we can only just see it, but Lisa's going to give a better sense of how to access the records directly. But you can see here that this is the record of the forced sale of a fishing vessel that was owned by Mr. Tanaka of East Hastings Street, Vancouver. Its replacement value at the time of its sale was about $13,000, and it was sold, you can see in the upper right corner of the image, for about half that amount. This record and hundreds like it are available because of the decisions of one man to preserve them. Could you advance the slide, Tomoko? Kishizo Kimura is the man seated in the far right of this image in the boater hat and the black bow tie, one of those four young men dressed for the occasion. A trip to Bowen Island in 1926 with friends and family. I learned about Kimura and his involvement in preserving these records after embarking on research first at the Library and Archives of Canada and then at the National Association of Japanese Canadians. Could you advance the slide, Tomoko? My first interest was, oh, I'm missing a bit here. Try to advance one more and let's see what happens. Oh, that's okay. Go back up, Tomoko. Thanks. Oh, back up the other way, please. And then one forward. Thank you. Yeah. I first learned of Kimura when I was interested in a process that didn't involve the fishing vessels. It's this process that you can see documented here. This is an image that appeared in the Vancouver Sun on the 26th of February, 1946, announcing that there were new faces behind the many establishments in Vancouver, and that it was anticipated that new white owners would be taking over more and more businesses and properties that Japanese Canadians were forced to leave behind when they were uprooted from coastal British Columbia in 1942. Of course, this documents the forced sale of a business. And what I was interested in at that time was the forced sale of real estate, businesses, farms, homes. If we advance to the next slide. Many of you will already know on this call that all forms of property that Japanese Canadians couldn't take with them in 1942 were seized and then forcibly sold without their consent. So all the kinds of property that you see in an image like this, from the dining room table and chairs to the dishware in the upper left, the stock and trade of businesses, the bicycles and toys of children, pianos, and even the large industrial properties like the lumber mills of Akichi Kagetsu that you see on the bottom right on Vancouver Island. Could you advance the slide? Of course, another major form of property, and among the first seized and sold, were the fishing vessels owned by Japanese Canadians. And here you can see in an iconic photograph, this copy of it donated by the Kimura family to the Vancouver Library. Over 1,000 fishing vessels that were impounded in the early days of the war and held here at the Annieville Dike on the Fraser River. Kimura participated in the forced sale of these fishing vessels. Kimura sat on two critical committees, one first selling the fishing vessels, and then the second dispossessing Japanese Canadians of properties that they owned in Vancouver, of the real estate that they owned in Vancouver. And I encountered Kimura when reading these files that you see here. I went to Ottawa to try and understand the forced sale of those businesses and homes in Vancouver, and found records like these records that many of you will now know as the case files of the custodian of enemy property, documenting those sales. And in some of the administrative records, they mentioned a Mr. Kimura, about whom I knew nothing. I had not heard of Kimura before. And often the records conveyed Kimura in a very sort of blatantly tokenistic way, even with phrases like, Mr. Kimura, who is a person of the Japanese race, approved this sale. Or Mr. Kimura, a person of the Japanese race, participated in this discussion. And I became very curious, who was this Mr. Kimura who had participated in these discussions that resulted in the dispossession of his own community? You can advance the slide, please. Kimura had been involved in cooperatives in the pre-war period, organizing the sale of fish harvested in Canada to Japan. And in that capacity became connected with leading figures in Canadian fisheries, who then invited him, once the fishing vessels of Japanese Canadians were seized in 1942, to serve on a committee that oversaw that process. And Kimura described consulting with members of the community who he claimed supported his decision to serve on the committee. And he described his role sometimes as a witness on those committees, as someone who could ensure that the best interests of Japanese Canadian owners were served. It's not clear that he received any income or direct benefit from his participation in these committees. Then, after the fishing vessels were sold, Kimura went to Christina Lake, where his family spent the uprooting and internment period. And there he received a phone call inviting him to participate again in overseeing or participating in an advisory committee that oversaw the forced sale of real estate. And as I learned more about Kimura, I came to wonder what I might have done if I was in a position like that and received phone calls like those or invitations like those in that moment. And I increasingly wanted to understand, who was Kimura and how did he justify his decisions? If you could advance the slide. Remarkably, Kimura kept a record of those very questions, keeping detailed notes on both the activities of the committees on which he served and his own reflections on that process. He then passed the records to his children, this memoir, a record that they couldn't read, and which they held for some time before donating to the Nikkei National Museum, where I found it in 2011. Please advance. The memoir provides a glimpse into how he justified his own actions. And in a particularly telling section of the memoir, with which I spent a lot of time, Kimura wrote, and he's writing in the 1960s or early 1970s. From the current perspective, at a time when protests and demonstrations are the trend, there might be some who laugh at the Nikkei who conducted themselves with silence and obedience for decades. Reading these words, I had some sense of the shame that Kimura felt as he wrote about these decisions. If you could advance the slide. Kimura wanted his actions understood within the context of their own time, which is a phrase we often hear applied to the government, that we should understand their actions in the context of their own time. And it's an interesting concept to think about with regards to a Japanese Canadian who participated in these processes, or I found it very compelling. He wrote, I would like you to understand that the Issei were not an inferior ethnic group. They had to take care of their families in Japan. Even if they studied, sacrificing their families at home, there was no way for them to find good employment. They had to take care of their family in Canada. And they had somehow to build up a base in the face of vicious anti-Nikkei campaign. You might laugh at my slim advice, but I would like to urge you not to foment unconscious ethnic self-hatred. He wanted his children from the perspective of the 1960s, a very different political moment, to understand his actions as emerging from a very different time, and thought that somehow if they laughed at or belittled him, they were in some sense belittling themselves and their own origins, is the argument he makes here. Please advance. Depending on the time period, situation, environment, and social standing, the outcomes are different. There might also be different opinions among us. However, I just want young people to understand that the Issei were by no means stupid or ignorant. And yet he wrote these words in a language that his children couldn't understand, and so it has this complicated legacy as a record. This memoir, along with the other records that he preserved and gave to them, and seemed very much to want to communicate with them, and yet did so in a way that they would never be able to read, or they weren't initially able to read until it was translated. Please advance. I had the chance to think through this complicated document, which, as I say, I found very personally compelling, along with colleagues, and it ultimately resulted in the publication of a book with Pamela Sugerman, Witness to Loss, in which a number of community members also contributed reflections on the memoir, and it includes Kimura's memoir in translation. In addition to recording his thoughts, Kimura was also an early archivist of this history. He was recording and preserving at a time when Library and Archives Canada still sealed these records, the records of the dispossession of Japanese Canadians. It remains one of the most complicated and troubling documents that I've ever worked with. If you could move the slide forward. At the same time, as colleagues and I wrestled intellectually with the questions presented by Kimura's memoir and the records that he had preserved, a whole other process was occurring at the same time. And that was under the leadership, especially of people at the Nikkei National Museum, and first among them, Linda Kuomoto-Reed, who was the person who introduced me to Kimura's records and brought me materials from Kimura's records that I didn't know existed, and really conveyed to me the extent to which there was a larger community of interest that surrounded these materials. And so whatever exploration I and other scholars might undertake in relation to the memoir or other aspects of the records, there was this whole other process, Linda convinced me, of making the records available, of offering them for interpretation, of conducting sessions like this in which Japanese Canadians could access the records in ways that were connected with their own community. So, and I think, we'll see the results of that work in the session today, and Linda's spirit, I think, infuses everything that is happening here. Could you advance, please? Whatever else his legacy, Kimura preserved these documents. His children talked about him putting them into a safe when he went out for dinner and or entrusting them to friends whenever he went on a trip. So he had a sense of the importance of this process in which he had been involved and the importance of the documents of that process. So, in addition to his complicity with the dispossession, it's also to his credit that we're able to continue to work with these records and to understand them today. If you could advance again, and that's thank you. I'm happy to be here for questions that folks may have, and I look forward to the rest of the session.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Now we'll hand it over to Louise. Louise Noguchi is an artist and a recently retired professor in the Art and Art History program at the University of Toronto, Mississauga and Sheridan College. Her artwork has been exhibited in Canada and internationally. Her upcoming exhibition will be at the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center Gallery during Nuit Blanche on October 4th and will end on January 23rd, 2026. So Louise?
Thank you very much, Emily, and thank you, Jordan. You answered a lot of questions I've been thinking about, plus makes me even more curious about Kimura. Anyhow, so I am going to read my notes. It's kind of a complicated project that I'm working on, so I hope you will allow me to just read from my notes. So my interest in the seizure of the Nikkei boats by the Canadian government was likely sparked by a request from Mary Kitagawa, who led the campaign for a commencement to be held for Japanese Canadians who were expelled from the University of British Columbia during the war. Mary asked me for my father's bio since he was one of 76 students attending UBC in 1942. I interviewed my father about the key moments of his life for the bio, one of which was working at the Koyama fish camp on Gabriola Island during the summer months, and his hopes to become a doctor, which were cut short due to the internment. Shortly after I interviewed my father, he passed away, leaving me with more questions that I wished I could have asked him. So my father had many accomplishments in his life, but I did not think that his time working on the Koyama fish camp would have stood out for him. Later, when I had a 4-month sabbatical, I searched the fish camp and found a story by Phyllis Reeve, the former owner of the camp that Kanshiro Koyama once rented for his business. But now it was a marina and resort owned by Phyllis's daughter, so I knew I had to visit it. I also decided that I would do a project about the different routes that JC fishermen would have taken during the time that my father was there. I remember my dad casually mentioning places like Gabriola Pass, Galliano, or Jesse Island, where his uncle Rikimatsu Tabata once owned a herring saltery. I know to people who live on BC, these places do not sound exotic, but they were to me. So I thought I would do a project that looks at fish migration along the coast, where I could mention all these exotic names and include some beautiful drawings of the currents and waterways. But beauty has never been a part of my work, so that was just a fantasy. But it was a start to my journey. Here's a photo of pages on Gabriola, where the fish camp once stood, and a part of my father's letter to his sister when he was 19 years old. Next slide, please. After going to Gabriola Island, I went to the National Nikkei Museum and Cultural Center to meet with Linda Reed. I must have read in advance about the confiscated boats because I asked her that from my count, around 100 boats were missing from the file. I remember Linda saying, "Now that's an interesting question." Linda brought out the files, but unfortunately I did not have enough time to look. through them all. Next slide, please. However, I went home and I made an Excel sheet on the various boats from the Kimura funds at the museum's website. What I was interested in was the name of the boat, its official number, the owner's name, and the type of boat, and its hull size. It was too difficult to search each boat using the museum's website, and I felt an Excel sheet was the easiest way for me to track this information. Next. Ooh, sorry, maybe am I, okay. However, yes, I emailed my cousin Yuki Nakamura, who is a volunteer at the JCC archives, and told her about my Excel sheet. She said, "You could have looked it up on the LOI website." So I did. However, when I looked at the website, it did not have the boat's official number, which for me was important because it was similar to all the numbers that were given to intern Indians. People were treated like objects or just like a boat license to them. Additionally, the website did not include the boat's hull size. Next slide, please. I then began wondering how I could experience the size of what was lost and thought I should draw all the boat hulls at full size. However, I lacked a large enough studio, and I was uncertain if I could physically draw all the boats. When Joy Takahashi of the JCC gallery invited me to create a work for Nuit Blanche, I thought of this project and thought it would be perfect as the gallery walls are 60 feet long and can accommodate up to 68 feet, which is the largest boat in Kimura's ledger. For this project, artists have been invited to draw the boats. Additionally, I placed an ad in the Nikkei Voice inviting descendants of the fishing boat owners to share brief stories about their relatives' boats and read details about the other boats the artists will depict. One challenge I encountered was understanding the depth of the boats, specifically the boat's draft, which is measured from the waterline to the bottom of the hull, excluding the distance from the top of the hull to the waterline. To assist my work, I decided to use blueprints from the City of Richmond archives, generously donated by Japanese-Canadian shipbuilders' families. A designer is currently helping me convert these blueprints into Illustrator files. The illustrations will be scaled according to the boat's length and aligned with a common waterline drawn on the gallery wall when projected, which will help simplify the drawing process. So you can see in this picture the waterline. There's a little bit on the top boat blueprint in the water area. That's kind of the water line. In all of the blueprints, there was a water line that's suggested. And you can see some of the illustrations the designer made and a photo of myself. I'm handwriting all the information of all the boats that I found in the ledger. Next slide. My project Shape of Loss will include video interviews with descendants of boat owners who live on the West Coast and those who cannot attend Nuit Blanche. When I videotaped Frank Nakashima, he was unsure of the names of his father and grandfather's boats. I looked up these names on my Excel sheet and later found his grandfather Eikichi Nakashima's custodial file, where I located the paperwork for the Kuroshima, a boat not listed in Kimura's ledger. I also discovered other boats such as Miss Seymour, which lacks similar paperwork but can be found in the owner's custodial file. There are many more. As mentioned, Kimura's final tally of confiscated boats was 1,137, while my count of the documents at the museum is 1,018 boats. Debbie Jang, the founder of the Japanese-Canadian Fishing Boats Facebook page, has agreed to assist and collaborate on locating these boats once I finish the exhibition's Shape of Loss. Next slide, please. Yes. So rather than haphazardly finding the custodial files, I asked Tomoko Shida and Michael Abe how I can easily find each person's file and go through the cases alphabetically. They directed me to this LOI site, so it's very easy to find everybody's files from this website. So I find it really convenient, but I find it also a daunting task to have to read. I think there might be over 2,000. There's a lot of files that I would have to read, so to go through. So next slide, please. And this is my last one. So these are other resources I use. So I use NAJC+PWFC. They have, if you look up a boat from the ledger, you will find information on that boat in NAJC+PWFC. And some of the listings will show you who purchased the boat and who may even own the boat right now. So it may even be floating on the ocean right now, but often they don't include those that information. But it's interesting. And the West Coast Fishermen's Facebook page, that's where I met Debbie Zhang, and this is her a Facebook page for the Japanese Canadian fishing boats, which I highly recommend if you do have a relative with a fishing boat and you have images. I would definitely contact her and join the Facebook page. And also, I wanted to mention that I did get a lot of information from the City of Richmond Archives, the Nikkei Museum, the JCC Archives, the Vancouver Public Library Collection, and the UBC Archives Japanese Canadian Collection. And I must highly recommend Masako Fukawa's book, Spirit of the Nikkei Fleet. It is there that I read that my grandfather was the last secretary of the Japanese Benevolent Japanese Fishing Benevolent Society. Anyhow, I visited his former office when I was in Steveston, but it might have also been in this book or possibly reading Kimura's diary that I found out that my grandfather was also part of the Nikkei Liaison Committee, which liaised between the boat owners and the buyers. So it's quite interesting because when Jordan brings up Kimura and his involvement, I'm also thinking about my grandfather. So it brings it all together, I suppose, in my project. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Louise. We can hand it to Marlene Howell now. So Marlene Howell is a Canadian artist born in Toronto and now based on Vancouver Island. She was trained in Toronto at the Arts Student League of New York, and she has exhibited her work internationally from Sudan to Cambodia. Her art often draws on archival photographs to explore memory, place, and Japanese Canadian history. She's currently developing the project To See is to Remember, a series of reflecting on Japanese Canadian lives in the 1940s and 50s. So, Marlene?
I have to unmute, please.
Marlene, you're muted. There
Better?
you go. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invite. My interest in depicting scenes involving Japanese Canadian fishing boats that were either requisitioned by the Canadian government or confiscated to be sold at far below market value started with an email from the Assistant Director of the Maritime Museum of British Columbia, Brittany Weiss, Brittany found me through the Japanese Canadian Artist Directory and invited me to participate as an artist in residence with the Lost Fleet exhibit starting in January 2019. My body of work, titled A Series for Contemplation, consisted of 4 paintings. Titled A Series for Under New Management, How Sound 4, Beyond My Dignity, and The Way It Was, of which the last 2 are in the collection of the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center. The reception for the Lost Fleet exhibition is where I first met Michael Abe, Dr. Jordan Stanger-Ross, and Dr. David Suzuki, who were on the panel of speakers. I also met Tsugio Kuroshima, president of the Victoria Nikkei Cultural Center. After I learned that Susan Fukuyama was doing research on her grandfather, Senkichi Fukuyama, and his business partner, Iwakichi Tsukiyama, who created House Sound Fisheries Limited, I thought that her family history would be an important part of the Lost Fleet exhibition, so invited Susan to be a participant. Susan's research was an invaluable source of Japanese-Canadian fishing history. The painting House Sound 4 is in Susan's private collection. Our participation in the Lost Fleet exhibition, I believe, was the beginning of the 7 years of research for Landscape of Injustice, and where both Susan and I turned to Michael Abe for help on researching our family's past. It was truly remarkable to discover so much of our family's history that we were not aware of. One of the visitors to the Maritime Museum of BC was Ross Tsuyuki and his family from Alberta. Ross contacted me a year later, commissioning me to do a painting of his grandfather's fishing boat, SF, Sadanosuke Furukawa, to present to his mother, Yoshi, as a birthday gift. The family did not have a photo of their fishing boat, nor did they have any information about it. I suggested that he contact Michael Abe to see if he would be able to help, and not surprisingly, he did. Information was found under boat ledgers and the LOI website. The bill of sale showed that SF was a gill knitter, valued at $900, but sold for $700 in April 1942. I was able to locate a suitable archival photo of Japanese-Canadian gillnet fishing boats through the Nikkei National Museum archives. Since Yoshi was raised at Imperial Cannery, archival photographs of Cannery Row and Stevenson made the perfect background. The painting SF is now in Yoshi Tsuyuki's private collection. The painting under new management is of the fishing boat Kuroshima No. 2. It was owned by David Nishioka's father, Ijiro. The bill of sale was found through Landscapes of Injustice. It was a packer and used for cod fishing. The market value was $4,500, but sold for $3,750. The painting is in David Nishioka's private collection. One other interesting discovery was made during a casual conversation with my childhood friend, Janet Kuwano Baba. She had mentioned that her father, Katsuyoshi Kuwano, owned a fishing boat called Sea Scout. Research on Landscapes of Injustice showed that Sea Scout sold for $1,400 in April 1942, but market valued at $1,600. The sisters, Janet, Marie, and Sherry, thought there was a second boat, which was determined to be true. Sea Scout No. 3 was sold for only $1,079, but valued at $1,800. This discovery meant that there had to be a third boat. Further research turned up the third boat, which was a gill knitter called Kiyoshi, previously called YF. It was sold to BC Packers in May 1942 for $475, with a market value of $800. I have incorporated the bill of sales for these fishing boats and others on the painting called Morning Sky, spelled Mourning, so named to illustrate the sadness, with the losses of property and livelihood for every Japanese Canadian of that era. Without the years of research by Michael Abbey and his committee and Dr. Jordan Stanger-Ross, much of the Japanese Canadian history would still be hidden. A fascinating but sad story was found through Landscapes of Injustice under oral history. Here is an excerpt by Jean Ikeda Douglas, my brother-in-law Doug Abe's aunt. And the only thing that my mother vowed was that she did not want to give up the sword that had been in the family, because we had come originally way back from a warlord family of samurai. And so we had, like the armor and a sword that had always been on the wall. And she said, there's no way she was handing that in after all these generations. And so, although Japanese people were not supposed to be out after dark, one night, my mother and our relatives that lived in North Vancouver, they were the boat makers, they came over and said, okay, we're going to row out into the straits where all the big ships would come through. And she threw it overboard. For the past year and a half, I have been working passionately on a body of work called To See is to Remember, which is based on the lives and memorabilia of Japanese Canadians during the 1940s and early 50s. My goal for this exhibition is to create an atmosphere of emotional growth, recapture precious memories, and open dialogue that has been ignored in the past. I'm very grateful to the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society for awarding me an art grant to make this all possible. Much appreciation to Sherry Kajiwara, Lisa Uyeda, and Danielle Jetty of the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center for their support, encouragement, and the invitation to exhibit 4 paintings from To See is to Remember in the Umame exhibition. Their archives department was a great source of inspiration. When I approached Kathleen Schmaltz, president of the Arts and Cultural Society of Colwood, about holding an art exhibition called To See is to Remember, I was met with so much interest and enthusiasm. And now we have planned the art exhibition to take place in July 2026. Thank you to Doug Kobayashi, Mayor of Colwood, for his support, and to the City of Colwood for providing a beautiful venue. To Tsugio Kurishima, Victoria Nikkei Cultural Society President, and Debbie Abaraki for their support. We are thinking of you, Tsugio. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Okay, so I think we're gonna do the database demo now, so I'll hand it off to Lisa, I think.
Thank you. And thank you, Marlene and Louise and Jordan as well. Tomoko was going to jump in on this, so thank you, Tomoko, for preparing this presentation, and I'll do my best to follow along with our live demonstration of the database today. So my name is Lisa Uyeda, and I respectfully acknowledge that I am joining you today from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish Nation and the Hunkaminam speaking nations, including the Whomwasqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam, whose ancestors have cared for these lands for countless generations. I am honored to live, learn, and gather together on Indigenous land. I am also a 4th generation Japanese Canadian and a grandchild of internment survivors who were forcibly uprooted from their homes in the Powell Street neighborhood to Hastings Park, Lemon Creek, Yellowhead Blue River road camps, Angler Preservoir Camp, Crow's Nest Pass, Moose Jaw, and Vineland, all before settling in Toronto eventually. So I am also the collections manager here at the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center, co-chair of the Past Wrongs Future Choices Archives Cluster with Masumi Izumi and Teresa Takazaki, And previously I was the co-chair of the Landscapes of Injustice Archives Cluster with Stuart Arneal. I'm just going to toggle my screen over and oops. That should do it. Great. Okay, I have two screens, so bear with me as I toggle back and forth. But as Emily mentioned, the Past Wrong Future Choices Archives Cluster has partnered with the National Association of Japanese Canadian Office to introduce what we believe is an important and easily accessible source for Japanese Canadian family history research, the Landscapes of Injustice, or abbreviated the LOI Research Database. The focus of my portion of today's session are the records about the fishing vessels that belong to Japanese Canadians prior to the forced uprooting. Specifically, I will be demonstrating how to navigate the fishing boat ledger and explore other material from the Kishizo Kimura phone, which is also how we refer to this collection. I will also briefly review the fishing vessel request letters collection that comes from the government archives. I won't go over everything today, but we are planning future sessions that will focus on navigating other subcollections in the database, as they contain a wealth of information available that may be potentially useful for family history research, or at the very least provide important context to understand the significance of certain dates, names, and other facts that you may have found within your family's case files. So please stay tuned and follow along to the NAJC e-news, Past Wrong Future Choices e-news, and the Nika National Museum's e-news to see those sessions and when they're coming up. Okay, so there are a couple ways to access the Landscapes of Injustice Research Database. So aside from just a Google search, one way is to navigate through the Landscapes of Injustice website at landscapesofinjustice.com. So here on the website, we have project results, digital research database up here. You can also scroll down, link to our new project website, Past Wrong Future Choices. But down at the bottom of the main page, you can also find the research database here, along with additional resources that I highly recommend going and exploring. So if we click on here, it'll take us to a page from the landscapesofinjustice.com website that gives us a bit more context and background into the development of this research database and the individuals who played a role in it. We also have more information and links to our previous presentations that we did in our final year with the Landscapes of Injustice project. And it spanned between 2020 to 2021, 2022. So if you missed it because it was a very busy time in the world, please do feel free to go back and explore these talks too. But here you can also access through this abbreviated link, loi.uvic.ca/archive. And clicking on that will take us to our home page here. So the short URL allows you, is a good one to bookmark. And on the home page, we can see here we have a search bar that allows you to do a keyword search of all of the subcollections and other resources that are here and were compiled with the help of many, many individuals. But for the records related to the fishing vessels, I recommend going directly to the specific collections. You can do this by navigating to the top menu and clicking on the collections button here, or you can scroll down to the big blue button that reads go to the collections page. Both will take you to the same spot. Okay, so from the collections page, you can scroll down to the fishing boat ledger box. And you can see all the other bundles of collections that we've got here as well. You will see a short explanation of each of these sub-collections, which you can also see in its entirety when you click the Read More button. Each record in this collection contains detailed information about one vessel that the federal government confiscated during the dispossession. Altogether, it contains hundreds of pages that make up the fishing boat ledger, originally compiled and saved by Kishizo Kimura, who, as Jordan touched upon during his portion of the talk, was a member of the Japanese Fishing Vessel Disposal Committee in 1942. So from this page, you have the option to browse or search. So let's start with search. You can search by vessel name or owner name or other boat identifiers here in the search box. And on the left-hand side, you can also filter results here based on appraised price, index, insured value, sale price. And so they have a bit more options there to narrow your search. But let's keep it simple, and we'll do a search by vessel name, perhaps by the name of the boat in one of Marlene's paintings. Kuroshima number 2. We'll just start with Kuroshima and we'll hit enter or search. And when we type that in, it comes up with just one search result. So from the left-hand slide, click that, and then from the left-hand side here, we can access the digitized file itself. You can download it there, or you can click on it to expand it here. And this shows you the page itself from the fishing ledger. And it lists details such as the official number, the value, the owner's name, their address. You can also find annotations written in handwriting at the top and bottoms. And in this case, we can just faintly make out it says sold there in handwriting, August 18th, 1942. And there's also a crossed out portion here, March 25th, 1942, that tells us that it was originally requisitioned in March before it was sold. Navigating back to the database view though, we can see on the right-hand side, or the main part of this screen, that portions of the ledger have been transcribed and encoded by our wonderful team of students with the LOI project. Not everything was encoded though, or transcribed, so they really just did take high levels. Looking back, we'd probably spend more time doing all of it now, and maybe one day we will, but for now, we have some of the information there. We've tried to indicate the annotations as well, so if you can't read the handwriting very well, we've done our best to add in those notes there. You can see here some of the information not encoded. The values were very important to do though. You can also find the names that appear in the records down at the bottom, registered owner's name and actual owner's name. And it's not always the same person. A lot of people borrowed and rented boats from other individuals. But you can click on these hyperlinks here and it'll take you and show you all the other records that are appearing in the LOI database that mention a shared surname or other links and resources. So I believe if we go to Nishioka, it'll jump down here and we can see all the results here. We'll click on the first one. So this one tells us a brief summary about them. He was a fisherman. His family includes Tomi, Sasanosuke, and many other family members. His home address, 414 East Cordova Street in Vancouver, and unfortunately he was forcibly uprooted to Popoff and within the Spokane area. We can see down here it lists that he has a case file, so that would be something that would be really interesting to explore. And if you click the arrow here, we can go back to our list and compare other names that appear as well. Thousands and thousands of names appear in this research database, so we weren't able to confidently confirm everyone is always the same person and to connect all those records together. So in the areas where we were unable to either dedicate the student time to help us do that work, or we didn't have enough information to piece together everyone, their names may appear a couple times. And that's fine. You can go through and you can click on every single one and see what records they're connected to and do some of that research as well. You may find that some last names are very common and some first names are very common. So there might be 5 people with the same name and just need to weed out and see who it is you're looking for. Okay, so if we navigate back to the collections page, over to the fishing boat ledger, we'll go back to the search function, and now let's try looking for SF. So we'll go back here, we'll add in SF, we'll hit search, and now you can see that the name is too short, it's too common, too short, and the database will not return any results. But not to worry, there is another way that you can search for this information here. So we'll go back to the fishing boat ledger page and we'll go to the browse mode this time. So here on the browse function, you can, within your computer keyboard, you can just do Control S or Command S to bring up your search. Whoop, sorry. Now you can see my ethics. I'm on the wrong screen. Control S. Oh, it's not working. Okay, well, it doesn't want to. I wonder if it's because I'm showing.
Control F.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I'm a little tired today. Control F. Thank you. Instead of search, Control S is for Apple, I believe, or Command F. Or no, wait, that's not right. Anyways, sidebar. So Control F to search and to find SF. So here we can type in SF and maybe we'll do dots this time. And here we can scroll down and find our result of what we're looking for. And all those names there are linked and it'll bring you up to its individual page as well. If you go back in the browse mode, scroll to the top, you can sort here with these up-down arrows as well to sort the boat names and the dates. The date function isn't very helpful because of the way the dates have been formatted following the universal standard, but the boat names, just helping to narrow it down there, is really great. But there's another way that's perhaps more useful for some folks to explore this boat ledger without emailing Louise to ask for her Excel sheet. And this can be found in our next resource here that I wanted to share. It's our educational website that was developed by LOI and us here at the NNMCC. And it's not actually part of the LOI database, but it was something that was a product of our Landscapes of Injustice project. You can find it here by going to witnesstoloss.ca, and it'll take you to this homepage. So at the top of the page, you'll navigate over to the ledger, and then we'll scroll down to our fancy button that says click here. Great. So it will not be super pretty, but it is a very comprehensive table and very functional index of all the Japanese Canadian fishing vessels represented in the Kimura's fishing boat ledger. You can again do a Control F to do a search and to find what you're looking for, such as boat name, but you can also now start searching by last name too, which is really helpful. You can also use these up-down arrows to sort. by those columns, including the sale date. This one here, it shows us by sorting by the sale date that according to Kimura's ledger, one of the boats was recorded as having been sold November 30th, 1941. It raises a lot of questions that we'll have to look into. And it was the Tsukunode here, and we can pull up the original record that will show November 30th, 1941. So question mark, and Tsukunode, and it belonged to Katsuichi Yamamoto. So if we go back one too far. And if we go back here, then we can also see that some of the information appears here and was encoded as well. It was priced $633. And can we find the sold number? Don't see it on quick glance, but we'll come back to it. So if you click the name in any of these left-hand columns for the boat names, you'll be able to open up those records there and take a scan of the original fishing boat ledger page. While we're here on the Witness to Loss website, though, I will also show you how to find Kimura's diary. You can also pick up your copy of our publication, Witness to Loss. But this is one where if you want to find it now and then buy the book soon, that would be great. So back on our homepage or back on the website, Witness to Loss, you can go to the top menu bar here and go to the diary. There's also other resources here. Here's the book that we had mentioned, and back to the diary. It's divided up into part 1 and part 2, and that was by Kimura, I believe. So taking a look through here, we have both the English and the Japanese text as well as the English translations of Kimura's diary. There's also oral history tapes that Jordan mentioned earlier that you can find here. We can click on that in a second. And Kimura divided his diary into 2 parts. So part 1 focuses on the Fishing Vessel Committee, while part 2 focuses on the Advisory Committee and on Nikkei Properties, Advisory Committee on Nikkei Properties, and other topics. So taking a look at part 1 here, you'll see a table of contents at first. As we scroll down, or maybe we can jump to, we have photographs of the fishing boats in the impoundment areas, the Annieville Slough or Annieville Dike. These are really heartbreaking photos. They're used all the time when talking about our community's history and the injustices. So you've probably seen most of these before. These original photographs are actually glued into Kimura's diary. So he included them with his diary here. And these are the scans that come from the museum. As we scroll down, we can see the English translation, which many individuals had contributed to helping to translate this information here, and his original handwritten diary, which Jordan had mentioned was really interesting that he wrote it in Japanese when his family was not able to read it. So it was really important to leave this information and to record it for his family and for our community. And he chose at the time to write it in Japanese. So it took a while for us to be able to translate it and read it and learn from it. But here you can click on the page and hit this pause button up here, or it will auto cycle on you to flip through. And it reads right to left. So here we can see it begins and how detailed and neat his handwriting was. For those who can read, the Japanese. He uses a lot of older characters too, so you'll get to learn some new kanji. So close that, and it continues. So each segment we have here, followed by the Japanese page, and a little bit more. But you can jump to all of that using the table of contents there. And then one last item on here was the Kimura tapes that we wanted to come back to. So here on the website, you can find excerpts of interviews that were recorded with Kishizo Kimura in 1973, which is around the time that he was finishing up writing his memoir. It is part of a larger oral history collection that is found at the Royal British Columbia Museum, BC Archives in Victoria. And here on this website, you can find the transcription of the original Japanese recording, as well as the English translation. So here we've typed out what he was saying and then provided the translation, and you can hit play to listen to it there. Timestamps there if you're not sure how long it'll take. I'd really like to acknowledge the Kimura family's dedication to safeguarding these important records for many years after Kishizo Kimura passed away, and entrusting them by donating them to us here at the Nikki National Museum and Cultural Center's archives. So we're very grateful for that. In addition to the fishing boat ledger and the memoir, though, there are more resources that came in with that donation and that were created and managed by Kimura. So we can navigate to find that here within the LOI database. You can also find it on our Nikki National Museum's online database, nikkimuseum.org. Apologies, we're in the process of updating that. So one day soon it will look much better and you'll be able to navigate to these exceptional resources there as well. For today, though, I'll just show you this one. So many records have been digitized, and we can find them by going back to the collections page here and going to archival collections. And this is where we can find a list of more resources. So if we go to the browse button, here you can see that we have all different repositories listed here that contain many phones or collections, and you can see how many records are available in each for you to go and explore. So I highly recommend taking a look at this. These records were selected, so by no means do they represent everything related to Japanese Canadians or our experiences within these repositories, such as LIC. They have much more than 34 collections, but these were the ones that we sourced as they were relevant to the LOI project at the time. Here you can find Nikki National Museum. We've uploaded 48 collections, and if we click on our name, it'll take us to a full list of the other collections that we've shared with the project. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can find phones 2010.4, Kishizo Kimura phones, and we can click on that there. Yeah, and let me just make sure I'm not missing anything in my notes. And within here, on the left-hand side, we have our menu with the phones level description here at the top. And then you can explore all the different series or groupings of materials that come from this phones or collection. Here we have more documents relating to the Fishing Boat Disposition Committee, documents on the Advisory Committee, and that's one that Louise had mentioned. Documents relating to, it says the evacuation, because we're following Kishizo's original titles. We used uprooting or dispersal, forced dispersal, and deportation of Japanese Canadians. You can also find digital family photos. So finding that photo, you'll find it here. He also kept a number of scrapbooks and newspaper clippings, really highlighting a lot of the forced sales and auctions Marlene's sourced a lot of these within her research as well. So even though newspaper clippings aren't typically something archives will keep, these ones were really exceptional and integral to understanding the full scope of the forced uprooting and the auction sales, but also Kimura and, you know, who he was as a document creator, and knowing one day that these would be important records, you know, a budding archivist at the time too. So you can explore all of these resources here and much, much more within the LOI database. And by clicking on these different files, we can click on, say, newspaper clippings, and start to explore some of these descriptions here. Anytime that the files have been digitized and are available online, you can find them up here in the download feature and open them up and flip through. And there you can see some of the scans. And then if you have any questions, you can always email our team at archives@ukplace.org, and Diane will drop that in the chat at some point. Very, very briefly, we'll go back to collections, and we just want to point out the fishing vessel request letters. This is a really interesting collection. So thus far, we've shown records that were created or kept by our community that tells the story of dispossession from our perspective or our roles at the time. This one, these fishing vessel request letters are very different. They're letters from individuals outside of our community from really all across Canada and the United States. And these were mailed to the BC and federal governments asking to purchase confiscated Japanese Canadian-owned fishing vessels pretty much immediately right after the boats were impounded. So as such, this collection is yet another stark example of the way people outside of the community were aiming to benefit from the dispossession or benefiting and benefiting from you know, the actions at that time. Yeah, and I think Tomoko, if you want to take back over screen share. We can jump over and we can highlight a few of the key collections here that will also support. Oh, Tomoko, are you able to share your screen or slides? There we go. Great. So some additional resources that'll that be very helpful and that have already been mentioned. We have the Nikkei fishermen on the BC coast, Spirit of the Nikkei Fleet. Both publications really highlight our community's fishing history, both on a broader researched, well-researched and written overview, but the Fishermen on the Coast also highlights individual entries that people had submitted on behalf of their families. Yeah, and shout out to Masako Fukawa and the Nikkei Fishermen's History Book Committee for compiling these resources together. And they're really integral there to support our research with the LOI database. On our next slide, you can also find a more recent publication that comes out of our museum, but really led by the committee, Fishermen's Committee. Kotaro Hayashi, Fumio Frank Kano, Henry Tanaka, and Jim Tanaka are the lead publishers, but they worked with many individuals to compile a really great publication, again, about the fishing community before the war and after. So these are some really integral resources there to go and explore. We've also mentioned just very briefly on the next slide there, Tomoko, is the Japanese Canadian Fishing Boats Facebook group. So it's moderated by Debbie Lee Zhang, a good friend of the community, avid researcher, wonderful educator. It's a private group for descendants of Japanese Canadian boat owners who are searching for their fathers or grandfathers' boats or family members. Debbie, being a seasoned historical researcher, and you've probably seen her on our Facebook groups, she's a great person to connect with here to talk about the fishing vessels and yeah, connect with others there too. And then I'll hand it over to Emily.
I'm going to let Debbie step in for a brief moment.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Toko. Thank you, Lisa, for that those kind words. Hi, everyone. I am Debbie Jang, and I am the co-admin of the Japanese Canadian Fishing Boats group. It's been mentioned a little bit already, and the link is in the chat. If I may share my screen, just briefly, I'll show you the magic that happens in this group. There's over 400 members now from all over Canada. A lot of them are white fishermen. 2/3 of the group are actually just old-timer fishermen, many of whom probably had fathers, uncles, grandfathers who bought the confiscated boats. But it isn't a place of judgment or finger pointing. It's actually a place of sharing. And I've asked the members of the group to please kindly share photos, because the other third of the group are made up of members of, like Lisa said, descendants of fishermen, grandparents or parents, and the family has never seen a picture of the boat before. And to me, the boat is more than just a fishing boat. I feel like it was part of the family and was separated from the family at the time of dispossession. And so it's very important for healing, I find, to at least see a picture of Grandpa's boat. And in some cases, if it's still afloat, there are very few left, but it speaks to the quality and the craftsmanship of these handmade, man-made boats that are still, some are floating on the water today. So I'll have to click continue so I can share the group. One miracle that happened last February was a match was made. And that match was made via a fisherman, a retired fisherman who collects pictures of fishing boats. And we had made a request. This is how it works. So you join, and then on the wall, you can say, I'm looking for my grandpa's boat. It's named the Zephyr, or that's an ongoing search right now. George Takahashi was one of the people who joined this boat and this group, and he wanted to find a picture of his grandfather's boat called the Point Jose. And I'm happy to report that George was very fortunate that a fisherman by the name of Ross Hulkstead had a picture of the Point Jose, and he posted it and said, is this it? And so here's the picture. And one day, he posted in February, and I missed it that day. I monitor this chat all the time. And Rob Critchley is the co-admin. He's a historian and fishing boat expert. And he said, oh, this picture is actually not Steveston, it's Deep Bay Cannery. So he gives some context into the photo. And then now they have a chat and they say, where's the photo now? And Rob says, oh, it's from the archives. It's not Ross's picture. He just collects them, right? And then George said, I'm very interested in the photo. Where did you obtain it? And he gives a little bit of description and said that his First World War veteran grandfather owned this boat. It was a fish packer named after his birthplace. Point Jose was 30 feet, 4 feet long. And he also found some archives from the database that Lisa just demonstrated. So George knew of its specifications and its name, even its value, and who bought it. But what George had never seen was a photo of his boat. So then Ross says, and George asked a really very touching question. He asked George if he could buy it. And what we realized, it's in public domain. It's a photo from the Richmond archives. And I helped George order that photo. I had it blown up and sent to him in Toronto. And there's now a little bit of closure for the Takahashi family. Even though I was a little late to the game, I found out a few months after that these two men had connected on the group that I'm admin for. But all of this kind of stuff happens every day. There are more people joining, more little miracles happening. And I'm happy to report that I was able to write up the story of the Point Jose. It's called Twice Sacrificed, Unaccounted Loyalty. And this is just the story of the soldier who lost his boat, the injustice. And some of these are clipped right out of the files. He was a First World War veteran, and I think in Mas Fukawa's book, The Spirit of the Nikkei Fleet, after the war and just before internment, there were still about 90 fishermen who were First World War veterans who lost their boats. And what an injustice, double injustice, because these men had gone to serve and came back to champion the rights of boat. And so this article is, Tomoko will help me put that into the chat. So very briefly, that's the Facebook group. It is a private group. Thanks, Lisa, for mentioning that, because you need to answer questions to get in. I don't just let anybody into the group. I'm very interested in keeping this group safe. And the other fishermen who are part of the group have been very respectful. They just contribute or comment on the boats because they bought them in 1942 and some of them held on to them for 50, 60 years. And so they have photos of the boat, in its later days, and they even know where that boat ended up. Some of them have been wrecked, and Rob usually chimes in. He knows the end of a lot of the fates of these boats. So it's really well worth jumping on. I get a couple of new people every week or so. And so it's simply called facebook.com and then /groups/Japanese Canadians fishing boats. And so just wanted to share that. And then lastly, thanks Tomoko for letting me just share that I am now the new manager of education outreach for JCLS. And this is the new website. JapaneseCanadianHistory.com has been launched, and it's rolling out this fall because the BC Ministry of Education has now mandated the teaching of Japanese incarceration and dispossession. And so I hope that you can bookmark the site and tell teachers about it. There are lots of resources on fishing boats because some of the lesson packages are about Steveston. There's one about identifying old photographs, and there's use of fishing boats in there. So there's a real wealth of resources here. And you can take a look. A lot of it ties into the LOI. There were 18 teachers, including myself, who were part of this initiative 3 years ago. And we're happy to say that it has now launched. And I will be going around BC and outside of BC, hopefully, to promote this website. So thank you for letting me share. And I hope to see many people join that fishing boat group. Would love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Lisa, for taking us through the database demo. Okay, so we'll just go through the last couple of slides here before we wrap up. Okay, so we wanted to just take some time to mention some of the exciting new projects for our special guest, Dr. Stanger-Ross. So he has a new book coming out titled Challenging Exile, Japanese Canadians and the Wartime Constitution. If you have any questions about this, feel free to ask him at his email. We'll show it at the end of the slide here. Next slide, please. And for Louise, her performance piece will take place at the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center in Toronto during Nuit Blanche on October 4th, 2025. So do not miss it if you're in Toronto during October. And the last one. And for Marlene, as she mentioned before, 4 of Marlene's paintings are being exhibited as part of the Umami exhibition at the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center in Burnaby until September 27th. In other exciting news for Marlene, a commissioned piece that she did for Victoria's sister city, Morioka, was well received, and Morioka is planning to hang the art piece in either City Hall or their museum. Marlene also won the street banner competition for the township of Esquimalt. She designed the Japanese flare. So these will be hung at the Gorge Park in time for the Victoria Nikkei Cultural Center Family Fair, which is taking place this coming Saturday, which is August 23rd. And as an aside, Mike Abe will also be involved in this family fair with a session on Japanese Canadian history and a guided tour of the Japanese garden in Gorge Park. Great. We have a little time for Q&A, like 4 minutes. So thank you everyone for coming, and invite people. We invite people to leave whenever they need. We'll just have a few minutes here for questions, and please fill out our feedback form so we know what to include for our upcoming sessions, and so that we know what you guys want to see in the future. And yeah, thanks again to our special guests today, and to PWFC for collaborating with us. I think that was really great.